President Nicolás Maduro addresses the nation on May Day and hears from workers all over the world.
Also to the police, the military, a big applause to the civil.
Repression from Chile security forces against May Day demonstrators.
Great tragedies can be
And
felt
solidarity
in
messages pour in from world leaders and trade unionists as International Workers' Day is celebrated online.
over 5,000 Brazilians who died from coronavirus.
During this May Day, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro gave a special recognition to health workers in Venezuela fighting nonstop to halt the COVID-19 pandemic.
I ask all of you for a strong applause to all workers in Venezuela, especially of the health sector, doctors, nurses, also to the police, the military. A big applause to the Civic Military Police Union. Thank you for all you've done.
And President Maduro informed of a horrific incident in Peru involving Venezuelan citizens who were trying to return to their country.
We are receiving Venezuelans from all over. Today there was a very painful incident. I told Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza to personally look after this. A group of Venezuelans came on foot from Peru and they were run over by a truck. We don't know if it was intentional. There are multiple dead, Jorge. I'm told now that there are 2 dead, 6 injured, including one who lost his legs. Venezuelans, brethren of ours, compatriots. I've told the Executive Vice President and the Foreign Minister to prepare a special plan for us, to bring those Venezuelans to pay for those buses and to send our airplanes once again. What happens is that our airline Conviasa, the government of the United States has sanctioned it, and these countries of the Lima Group don't want to receive these airplanes that I have ready to send to Chile to pick up Venezuelans, to go to Lima to go find Venezuelans to send to Ecuador. Let's go, Mrs. Vice President, Mr. Foreign Minister, hear me out. We're going to pay for buses. We're going to do everything so that they can return.
Many Venezuelan families living abroad are trying to return to their homeland in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. So is the case in Colombia, where close to 700 Venezuelan citizens have decided it's time to go back home.
Close to 700 Venezuelan citizens have lived in buses for at least 5 days. They are trying to go back to their country, saying that since the novel coronavirus arrived in Colombia, they haven't received any kind of help.
Where is the money that they have received from the United Nations, from the United States? Where is the money? Duque doesn't want Venezuelans to leave because if they do, where are they going to get money from? The only thing we want is to be allowed out of here.
Entire families say they use the little money they have to buy the bus ticket to the Venezuelan border. So is the story of Pedro and his family. They lived in Colombia for 2 years, before he lost his job when the government imposed a mandatory quarantine in Bogotá.
Because of the situation we are living at this moment, they closed down the company I worked for. I was left without a job, and that is why we decided to leave Bogotá. We've been here for 3 days, without food, but with the help of God we are moving forward.
The Migration Office in Colombia says the exit of Venezuelan citizens must be done in an orderly fashion, since all of immigration points are currently crowded. That is why it's been hard for these families to leave Colombia. But people living in the area have shown their solidarity.
We can see the people without food, the kids, and it just breaks our heart. We, as the Chinese community, are going to help and donate as much as we can.
This time, they weren't able to cross the border and were sent back to parking lots in Bogotá. That is where they spent the night, hoping to be back home very soon.
Moving on, Bolivia's coup president Janine Áñez is refusing to hold elections as she claims the country is in an emergency due to COVID-19. She stated her decision to hold on to power on Twitter. On Thursday, the president of the Congress promulgated the law to call for general elections within 90 days, a measure which had been approved in both the lower house and by senators. The movement towards socialism warned all along that the coup leader would refuse to leave office and had no intentions of taking office for a limited interim period. With this, the future of elections remains unclear. And while the de facto coup authorities refuse to give Bolivians a chance to elect its representatives, security forces are engaged in repression in the city of El Alto. This woman, along with others, have been demanding for food, social assistance payments, which were promised by the de facto government, and free elections. Many are saying they cannot go on without working with no income and no assistance from the regime. These scenes are taking place in the Sencata area of El Alto, where a massacre took place on November 19th, just a week after the coup. In Chile, demonstrators took to the streets of Santiago to peacefully protest with social distancing. Various protesters were arrested by police forces, including journalists and union leaders who were violently repressed despite having a permit to be on the streets. Protesters took to Dignity Square in Santiago yet again in rejection of the government and its neoliberal policies. The unrest began back in October and is ongoing. St. Lucia's Prime Minister and former CARICOM Chair Alan Chesney is going to lead the efforts of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States to reopen the tourism sector in June. The 11-member group selected Chesney, who said he humbly accepted. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister addressed his country's successful containment of the coronavirus, noting that there was no secret formula to fight COVID-19. Last week, St. Lucia reported a 100% recovery of all 15 of its COVID-19 patients. However, 2 more cases were recorded this week.
Empowerment to all people and to build a new St. Lucia.
26 cases in 24 hours have taken Jamaica's COVID-19 figure to 422. 203 of the cases are related to a workplace cluster in St. Catherine. The country also recorded its 8th death. The ages of all confirmed cases range from 2 months to 87 years. Meanwhile, 29 people have recovered. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States is intensifying its blockade against Cuba. These unilateral measures have a negative effect for the health sector on the island. Our correspondent in Havana, Nayera Tardo, has more.
Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez has denounced via his Twitter account that in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, the State Department has intensified the financial blockade against Cuba, adding that it is also promoting a campaign which seeks to discredit Cuba's humanitarian medical missions around the world. At the National Orthopedics Technology Lab, at least 400 patients are treated daily. Ernesto is one of them. His 2 legs were amputated, and for almost 40 years now, he has required prosthetics.
I feel so thankful because I'm given the opportunity to feel useful.
Dr. Jose Luis is one of the founders of this institution. He says he never imagined that he would also be a patient for 50 years now.
I work as a surgeon. I need to be standing when I work, and thanks to the orthopedic devices in this institution, I am able to do so.
But raw materials are not always available. Here, some 47,000 prosthetics are produced per year. Each of them can cost from 2,000 to 200,000 euros. But the United States is preventing Cuba from acquiring them, making the cost much higher.
The issue is getting our hands on these products and how fast they can arrive to Cuba.
While the COVID-19 pandemic has shown the fragility of health systems around the world, in Cuba, health professionals find ways to overcome the U.S. blockade in order to offer the best available care for patients.
Nayara Tardo, Telesur, La Habana.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the country on television to mark Workers' Day. He expressed concerns about the impact of COVID-19 on jobs in the country.
We are marking Workers' Day at a difficult time for our country and the world. The poor and the working class are having to bear the burden of a global pandemic that has caused severe economic and social disruption. It is now clear that the world will experience a substantial economic contraction and in the immediate future a significant rise in joblessness. Our own country, South Africa, will not be spared from this. The challenges that confronted us before the outbreak of coronavirus, such as low economic growth, unemployment, poverty and inequality, have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Our efforts to turn the economy around, to create opportunities for young people, to stabilize public finances and to restore state-owned enterprises have now suffered a great setback. To emerge from this crisis will require an extraordinary effort.
And also marking International Workers' Day, Brazil's former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva offered a message of hope to citizens. He reminded that it was the workers who keep the economy moving and said it will take workers to rebuild the world in the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic.
Great tragedies can reveal the true character of people and things. I'm not just talking about the disrespect that the Brazilian president has meted out against the over 5,000 Brazilians who died from coronavirus. The pandemic has also left capitalism naked. It took 300,000 corpses for humanity to see the truth, something we workers have known since the day we were born. The tragedy of the novel coronavirus has exposed an unquestionable fact that is not a capital that sustains capitalism. It is us, the workers. This is an age-old and well-known fact headlined by business newspapers across the world, the Bible of the world elite, that capitalism has its days numbered. They are numbered. It's dying. The task of building this new world once this is over lies in our hands, the hands of the workers.
And João Pedro from the National Coordination of Brazil's Landless Workers Movement made a call for a unity.
More than 100 years ago, the working class around the world takes to the streets on May Day as a way of celebrating the workers' struggle and the marches that along the years have given everything for the rights of the people. This May Day is very special because all of us around the world are living the consequences of the brutal imperialism and capitalism that takes away the people's rights. That is why we need to build a synergy around the world, even though if it's online, in order to come together in stronger and build an anti-imperialist world, without war, for life, and with food and health.
Union leaders around the world are sending their solidarity messages marking May Day. Let's have a look.
In the midst of this pandemic, we are living very difficult times, where organization is a key element for the transformation process. That is why we have to organize ourselves in order to face the current situation we are going through. From the people's power in the city and the fields, we also hold the world.
The situation here in Argentina in the midst of the quarantine has been accompanied by workers' unity. We have been accompanying them in our fights, giving them support during the quarantine and fighting so that all workers have their rights respected. Workers of the transportation sector sustain the world.
My name is Buzi Gode, the elected president of the Shareholders Movement of South Africa. The coronavirus has been very devastating to our communities. It has caused stress and anxiety. It has given rise to massive, violent and unlawful evictions, leaving hundreds of families homeless. Advocacy has been organizing in the face of this coronavirus through the provision of food parcels to our communities. We've been able to engage the state and lobby them to provide water and sanitation to our communities. In the face of this difficulty, we continue to support the world. We support the world.
Now, majority of the people in the world are under lockdown. But the workers of the world though they are hard hit by the pandemic, though mostly the workers in the invisible sector, informal sector, they are not getting even the shelter and the food. It's the workers who sustain this world during this pandemic, especially the nurse and doctors and all medical staffs. They are working all day and nights, and even the security personnel are working to keep us safe. That's why during this May Day, we are saying that it's workers who sustain this world, it's us who sustain this world. Peasant communities, they are also producing the food to feed the world.
Selamat Hari Buruh, May Day greetings. I'm Saraswati Muthu from Malaysia, Executive Secretary of National Union of Workers in Hospitals, Support and Allied Services. Comrade, the COVID pandemic has brought the world to a standstill. The world's economy has collapsed and a recession looms. Factories, farms, plantation and industries have ground to a halt. The jobs and income of millions of people are in threat. The worst hit are the precarious working class, an increasingly large number of informal workers, contract workers without social protection and job security. Contract cleaners at government hospitals in Malaysia are part of the precarious workforce and among the frontliners in the fight against COVID-19. Their management has put their lives at risk by not providing sufficient personal protective equipment like face masks, gloves, and aprons. The privatization of the cleaning services to the government-linked companies like Agenta UEMS has placed the profit motive ahead of the safety of the workers. The working class must continue the struggle for workers' rights and a better world. Workers of the world unite. Long live class struggle.
We're taking one last break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. Earlier, we spoke to Ozzy Warwick. He's the Chief Education and Research Officer of the Oil Field Workers Trade Union in Trinidad and Tobago. We discussed how the union will mark May Day amid the COVID-19 pandemic and how they have been able to address the fight on behalf of workers' rights after many businesses have imposed salary cuts or laid off workers due to COVID-19.
We are going to be marking it with what we call a virtual rally. We are going to have the trade union leaders from the Federation, which will belong to the Joint Trade Union Movement. And we are going to have the various trade union leaders bring solidarity, bring a message across to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Using the technology, we'll also be live streaming this virtual rally. It will be led by the president of the Joint Trade Union Movement and, of course, the President General of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, Comrade Ansel Roger. Well, the trade unions, we have been using various platforms in order to advocate for businesses to maintain jobs as well as to maintain the income. We have been making this case both publicly as well as in discussions with the government, as well as with other business sector and other federations. We have made it very, very clear that what is required is for workers to maintain their jobs as well as to maintain income, because after this COVID pandemic is over, we'll have to look at recovery, and it would be the same workers who would play a critical and instrumental role in resuscitating the economy. And therefore, it makes sense, makes very good sense for the businesses to maintain the jobs as well as to maintain income.
We also heard from Kwesi Pratt Jr. of the Socialist Forum of Ghana, who sent a message from Ghana to those nations facing continued sanctions by the United States.
It's actually criminal for sanctions to be imposed on a country like Cuba, which is not just fighting COVID-19 within Cuba, but it's assisting many countries, including Italy, several countries in Europe and Africa, to combat, COVID-19. I think it's really criminal to impose a blockade on Cuba. Of course, when it comes to Venezuela, it is clear that the imposition of sanctions on Venezuela is part of the regime change agenda of the ruling elite in the United States of America. It is not in the interest of the world. It is not in the interest of the Venezuelan people. It is going to lead to havoc in Venezuela, and we condemn that unreservedly. Of course, we do know that Iran is also facing sanctions because Iran refuses to bow to the interest of the West. Iran refuses to bow to Donald Trump. And because of that, Iran is also facing sanctions and so on. The case in Palestine is a case of harsh colonial occupation by the Israeli authorities. And on May Day, a day for liberation, a day for solidarity, we declare our full, uncompromising solidarity with the people of Palestine fighting against Israeli occupation. Then, of course, there's the case of Western Sahara, which is also facing colonial occupation by Morocco. And our solidarity goes out to the people of Western Sahara resisting Moroccan occupation. It also goes out to the people of West Papua, who have also been colonized and who are resisting colonialism, and to all the Indian Ocean islands in Africa.
South Koreans have held Labor Day demonstrations in Seoul amid the global coronavirus outbreak. Protesters wore protective gear and maintained social distancing rules while demanding that their rights be respected. The peaceful sit-down occurred in the presence of law enforcement. Among their many concerns, the workers called on the government to ensure they receive unemployment benefits and are paid for holidays. Sporadic protests also took place in Lebanon to mark International Workers' Day. Dozens of people gathered at Martyr Square in the capital Beirut to voice their anger about the country's economic crisis. Despite the peaceful procession, troops were deployed around the square and Prime Minister's office to protect government buildings. Marking Labor Day, Pope Francis prayed for workers all around the world and lamented that there are many people who are slaves to capitalists who underpay them.
Even today, there are many slaves, many men and women who are not free, who are forced to work just to survive, nothing more. They are slaves. It is forced labor, unjust, badly paid, forced labor that tramples man's dignity. There are many, many in the world, many.
And finally, legendary Nigerian drummer Tony Allen, who created Afrobeat along with his old bandmate Fela Kuti, died suddenly at the age of 79 in Paris on Thursday. His manager confirmed the death and said he didn't know the exact cause of the death, but added that it was not linked to the coronavirus. Allen was the drummer and musical director of Fela Kuti's bands Africa 70 in 1960s and the 1970s. During that time, the pair created Afrobeat, combining West African musical styles such as high life and Fuji music with American import jazz and funk. Afrobeat went on to become one of the thematic genres of the 20th century African music. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow us on social media as well. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.